This is Erin Lee. Come on, everybody. She is going to tell a story that is being replayed all across America. And we must hear this cry today. A true mother who became a warrior like Deborah and like Esther. We love you, we welcome you here to 222.
Thank you. Wow. What an honor to be invited by Papa Lou to be here today. I am not a prophetic pastor. I'm not a beautiful singer. I'm just a mom, a mama bear, one of the million women. And this is my Esther moment. Until May of 2021, I would describe myself as a sleepwalking mom and a lazy Christian. I was not in relationship with him, nor was my husband. We were not teaching our kids to find their identity in him. And then this truly demonic transgender agenda struck my home. My little girl, we had just turned 12. We had just moved to Wellington, Colorado. It was the height of COVID protocol. She's a shy, introverted, quirky kid. And one day her art teacher asked her to stay after school for art club in the art room. But when she got there, it was actually GSA, or Gender and Sexuality Awareness Club. And the art teacher had invited in extreme outside activists. One, a woman who runs an organization called Skittles for kids 2 and up to discuss gender and sex. The other, a self-proclaimed genderqueer, shape-shifting blood witch. And these activists did unthinkable things with the little kids, 11 to 13 years old. They told my daughter, if you're not fully comfortable in your biological sex, that means you're transgender. And what 12-year-old girl is fully comfortable in her body? So of course she took hold of that label. They asked the kids explicitly who they were sexually attracted to. And when my daughter didn't know, she said that means you're queer. Queer is a term you can label yourself with while you're figuring out your sexuality. They talked about polyamory. They talked about puberty blockers and how kids here in the state of Colorado at the age of 12 can access puberty blockers without parent knowledge or consent. They talked about parents potentially being unsafe. Don't tell your parents about this meeting. In fact, the rule of art club was what you hear in here, keep in here. They talked about suicide, telling the kids that these labels they had just adopted, including my daughter's new transgender and queer label, make them more likely to kill themselves. She handed out her personal contact information and asked the kids to connect with her on Discord and WhatsApp and various teen chat platforms where she knows parents are not monitoring the conversation. Thank God my daughter came home and told us everything that happened. That's great. But unfortunately, it was too late. She had taken hold of these identities. The confusion had struck her, and she truly believed that she was a transgender boy named Toby. That confusion hit deep, and the 9 months, the weeks and months that followed were really dark and scary for our family. We didn't know how to address the situation. Nothing in life had prepared us for this moment when our little girl would go to school on a normal Tuesday and she would come home a confused mess. So we did what any parent would do. We took her to therapy. And we found out the hard way that in the state of Colorado, licensed therapists are legally obligated to only affirm gender confusion. So the first therapist made her worse. So we found a faith-based therapist. And because of this law, she knew she could not touch the issue. She only avoided it, which further exacerbated our daughter's confusion. And about 6 months after the incident, December of 2021, our daughter left us a suicide note. She had become so overwhelmed by this confusion that led to depression that she didn't know how to live in the body that God had given her. So we took her to a pediatrician because we were afraid of the therapists. And the doctor had me leave the room for the mental health assessment. And when I came back, my daughter had already been prescribed Zoloft at 12 years old. So while we're fighting for our daughter's life at home, we were also fighting back against the people who caused this. We contacted the school, the principal. I stood before the school board, and admittedly, I had never paid attention to the school board before. I couldn't have told you their names. I couldn't have told you any of the decisions they had made, but I stood before them, a weeping mother, crying, begging for answers. Please, how did this happen? Why was my daughter there? Who is this woman? And it took 3 months for me to get any of my 7 school board members to return my calls and emails. When I finally got to sit down with one of them, she's best friends with the activist. She has what she believes is a transgender child. She told me we should be talking about gender and sex with kids as young as 4, and that gender and sex are never binary. This is when I realized I had just stumbled upon a much larger agenda than my family. So we called the police. Because if this had happened in any other setting than a school classroom, that would have been my first call. This was sexual abuse of a 12-year-old girl. And because there was no physical touch or exposure of body parts, thank God, that we know of, the police were unable to help us. So we went public with our story. We realized this agenda is so much larger than us. And when we went public, hundreds of families came forward to me. Now thousands. 4 of those families were in that art club. Their little girls had followed the rule, what you hear in here, keep in here. None of them told their parents. All of them became suicidal around the same time. In fact, one little girl drank bleach and attempted to take her life. So what I've discovered after 2.5 years of paying attention to my school district is this is truly a battle of good versus evil. Our children are the target. And millions of people in government, in our education, our healthcare systems, our mental health, our child protective systems are complicit in the agenda. I want to take just a few minutes to give you some examples of things I've discovered since performing public record requests on my district. I know you heard from my friend Mark Gonzalez yesterday, so you got a little overview of what's going on in America. But here's the specifics just from my school district alone. I found emails that 2 days after the incident in art club, the art teacher and presenter had colluded with the school board to keep me quiet. They referred to parents who find out as barriers that have been removed at other schools. And 2 days after the incident, when we were at our most vulnerable moment as a family, we were suffering, a moment that they had caused, they discussed calling Child Protective Services to my home for a well child check because I disagreed with what they did with my daughter. They said everything I say to them should be evidence. I found them praising the teacher involved. They've even promoted the art teacher. They've instructed all health staff in my school district that they cannot tell parents if a child is suicidal or cutting. So they're not only causing life-threatening situations, they're robbing parents of our right to care for our kids when they're at their most vulnerable. I found official talking points that you cannot opt your children out of clubs in the school district. So even if I had known this wasn't really an art club, I could not have opted my child out. And it often meets at lunch hour, so parents have no idea. I found a 15-page transgender toolkit. 15 pages of how to transition a child, what bathrooms to use, what overnight rooms to use, and the very first question on the gender support plan is, are the parents supportive? If no, how do we accommodate? I found an incident in an elementary school in the Poudre School District where they had transitioned an 8-year-old. The parents found out and objected, and then the principal took it to school administration, who took it to legal, whose official guidance was continue transitioning that child at school, just call them something else when you talk to the parents. I found out that when a 5th grade teacher objects to the human growth and development curriculum, which in the state of Colorado is horrifying, I recommend you all take a look at it. When a teacher objects, they told her to re-educate herself, that she could either teach it or leave. And who did they ask her to re-educate herself with? The transgender shape-shifting blood witch. Yes. We have school-based health centers in the Poudre School District. These are actual private healthcare institutions that are installed in our public schools where children can access vaccinations, abortion referrals, puberty blockers without parent consent or knowledge. And I found even further evidence of them letting in these concerning parties to have unfettered access with our kids. In fact, one of the parties, even more concerning than the Blood Witch, is the Foothills Unitarian Church. They are led by, quote, queer pastors. They have a sex ed program that starts at birth called Our Whole Lives, where they're teaching 1- and 2-year-olds about transgenderism and sexuality. They have a program called Be More Gay that they're pushing in our schools. And these are people that continue to come after me for speaking up. Our district has also proudly proclaimed that 30% of children in the Poudre School District are LGBTQ. 1 in 3. In fact, my child's abuser proudly proclaimed that 47% of children in Larimer County are LGBTQ. So this just skims the surface of the rabbit hole that I have fallen into, looking into my school district, and I understand how heavy it is. No one knows that better than me. So let's fast forward to today. Our daughter just turned 15 yesterday. Yes. And she has completely desisted the transgender identity. She's been freed, she's been saved, she's been delivered, she's thriving, she's an overcomer, and she now ministers to young kids who are going through this gender confusion. Yes, praise God. I'll tell you a quick story. We had a drag show in Fort Collins. They actually hold them here in Colorado Springs as well, for children with children performing. So child performers dancing sexually for tips from adults. And I decided I was going to join the protest outside of this bar. And by the way, they hold them on Sunday mornings, always on Sunday mornings. And my daughter, as I was leaving the house, we just got out of church, and I said, I have to go. And she says, Mom, where are you going? I said, well, I'm gonna go protest the drag show. And she said, I think I'm supposed to be there. And so she asked to come with me again. She's very shy, very introverted. And as she saw other gender-confused kids walking up towards this drag show, she would approach them and just ask really smart, thoughtful questions, to the point where they were flipping her off and calling her the C word and spitting at her, and she remained calm. She knew she was supposed to be there, and she continued to seek out these children and pray for them and have thoughtful conversations with them. So that's where my daughter is now. That's the reason I can be loud. Ours is a horror story with a happy ending. But the reason I can be so loud is because we're one of the lucky families who rescued our daughter. The reality is that our story is no longer the exception, it's the norm. And most of the families are still struggling to rescue their little girls and boys from this confusion. So I speak for the thousands and thousands of families who are going through this. While we were fighting this battle to save our daughter, everyone we turned to was deceiving us. The world now has this mentality that if a child is going through this confusion, you must affirm it, or they will kill themselves. Our therapists, you must affirm it. Even our pastor at the time, you should probably affirm it. Everything we tried wasn't working, and I realize now that's because this is not an earthly fight. It was when we turned to God that everything changed in our home. We're not battling flesh and blood. We're battling powers and principalities here. It was when my daughter turned to Him to find her true identity, and that we stepped up as parents to speak the truth that we knew the truth was all along, but speak it directly to her, that she was able to be freed. She needed us to be her off-ramp. It was that moment where we sat her down and had a direct conversation about 9 months after the confusion started, that you saw the relief on her face. Is this really what you want to do with your life? Do you really think you're transgender? Do you really think we don't support you? And she was relieved. It's not. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be done with this. She was waiting for us to be her lighthouse, her truth tellers. Children need to know that they can always come to us for truth. And we as adults need to make sure that we stay grounded in His word so that every word we speak to our children is the truth. My story is a story of redemption, of being gracefully broken down, and then crying out to Him for healing and guidance and protection. And for me, stepping into my Esther anointing. I was such a weak, spiritually lost, non-confrontational person when this all happened. Proof that God uses the most broken people. And I've learned now that God's got me, and He's got my family, and He's always had us. And being liked by the world is so insignificant. I'm called a bigot, I'm a hater, I've been called a racist, a murderer, a terrorist. I get death threats, we've had home break-ins, but none of that matters. All that matters is faithfully protecting God's children. So here's what my fight has entailed since rescuing my daughter. I'm awake now. I pay attention. I'm engaged. Yes, I've pulled my kids out of public school. No way I was putting them back in that setting. But I still fight for the public schools because what about the other 90% of children that are stuck in a broken system? I'm a resource for the thousands of families going through this. I run several support groups. I continue to expose the evil in our schools. You can find me, I go as Erin for parental rights. I filed a federal lawsuit with wonderful godly people behind me, America First Policy Institute, against the school district. I founded Stop Gender Ideology to be a resource for parents going through this, but not just for them, for all the parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles that want to inoculate your kids from this agenda that has become so pervasive in our culture, it's inevitable that your kids will be exposed to it. I've testified in multiple states for pro-parent legislation and against the gender mutilation of children. I've joined the Her Voice movement with Falake and Papa Lou that's founded by Jenny Donnelly to activate the Mama Bears. As you know, our motto is Esther 4:13. So on April 13th, we will be gathering at the west steps of the Capitol. I just secured our permit where we will pray, fast, and stand for the children of Colorado and the children of this nation. I've also made a film about what happened to our family. There's actually a banner out there. It's called Art Club. It's available for free at artclubmovie.com. And it was our heart to make this because we don't know what we don't know. And we can't do anything until we understand what's happening. And so we just wanted to very honestly and openly tell our story of how this can happen to anyone, at any time, anywhere. And you will glean from the movie that we were not strong believers before this happened. We were born again since we were brought to our knees and saved our daughter. And finally, I helped to found an organization called Protect Kids Colorado. Actually, Papa Lou was there at its inception here in Colorado Springs. We are running citizens' ballot initiatives to protect kids and strengthen families in Colorado. As you know, our legislature is radical. It's off the rails. We can barely even play defense anymore. They just passed a bill yesterday that will force teachers to call a child whatever they want to be called, even if it's against their faith, even if the parents don't agree with it. So we're running citizens' ballot legislation to ensure parents will know if their child's experiencing gender incongruence, to consent to mental and medical health care, to have access to view all educational records, and to keep boys out of girls' spaces. So I encourage you to go back and hook up with the team that's out there for Protect Kids. We're gonna need a lot of boots on the ground. This is a grassroots effort. The enemy is well-funded, and we are not, but we have strength in numbers. So if everyone carries one petition and gets 5 signatures, we can make this happen. Because the people of Colorado overwhelmingly don't agree with what's happening. It's as easy as filling in the bubble on your ballot to get engaged with this effort. So my call to action, don't be afraid to engage. Show up to your school board. Pay attention, even if you don't have kids in the district, even if you don't have kids at all. You pay their salaries with your tax dollars. But also, you have just as much right to speak to what our children are being exposed to. That's the next generation. And it's all of our responsibility to stand up for them. Carry a petition, vote. As I said, once we put this on the ballot, all you have to do is fill in the bubble. There's also a Right to Life initiative that's out there, and they are working to end abortion in the state of Colorado, and they need all the help they can get. So, we all have a role to play. The reality is that not everyone will be punched in the face with gender ideology. Not everyone will have a horrific story like my family did. But the reality is that every single child who's in a public school right now is having tiny little bites taken out of them bit by bit. Whether it's pronoun conversation, math problems that talk about 2 moms. They've inserted it into every area of the curriculum. And so my biggest call to action is get the kids out. Get them out of the government schools. They're no longer safe. And we have to hit them in the wallet in order for them to pay attention and change what they're doing. And I'm not anti-teacher. I used to be a teacher. I'm anti a very broken system led by demonic powers. I encourage you to expose incidents when you see them. Don't be afraid. Be the voice of truth in a state that desperately needs to hear it the most. I truly believe that Colorado is the epicenter of this demonic agenda. There are more kids in this state who are confused with transgenderism than any other state. So we must be the hands and feet of Jesus to fight this. Expose things when you see them. Don't be afraid. Stand up for the teachers. I actually read statements from my teachers at our school board because they're afraid. There is salt and light in the system, but they're afraid to speak up. So let's be their voice when they need it. And y'all, just talk about this issue. It's become so polarizing and political and controversial, but it shouldn't be. This is a demonic agenda on our kids, and it all starts with making sure everyone understands what's happening. So talk about it. Share our story. Share our film. When you see things that are happening, talk about it with your own sphere of influence. That's where we have the most power. And know that we already have victory in Christ. When I started all this, I was mad at everyone. I was mad at the teachers. I was mad at the principal. I was mad at all the people involved until I realized that that's not who I'm fighting against. And Christ already gave us the victory, so now I fight from a place of victory. If he's for us, who could be against us? And I'll end with this advice. If you take nothing else away, please hear this. We've got to inoculate our kids from gender ideology. I encourage you to tell all the kids in your life these 4 things early and often, your neighbor kids, your nieces and nephews, the kids you babysit. Number 1, safe adults don't ask you to keep secrets. Doesn't matter what the secret is, safe adults don't ask you to keep secrets. And I have a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old, and we struggled with this. Like, how do we protect them from this agenda? Because I don't want to talk about gender and sex with my 3 and 9-year-old. So I came up with these 4 things. Number 2, no one should ever ask you to label yourself. You are just you. You don't need to assign a political party, pronouns. You are you. God made you perfectly. It's not changeable, and you're amazing just the way you are. No labels needed. Number 3, trust your instinct. And that goes for parents as well. When we were sold the lie that we must go along with it, that she will kill herself if we don't affirm the gender ideology, we knew that was wrong for our daughter. We didn't listen to the world. We trust our instinct, and we trusted God. And that goes for children as well. Empower them. My son wears a gizmo watch. He's 9 years old, and he knows if someone breaks any of these rules, he will call mom right in front of his teacher. I'm calling my mommy. That's not safe. Empower them. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Remove yourself from a toxic situation. And then finally, tell your kids early and often that they are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. He does not make mistakes. He made us male and female. It's beautiful. It's who you are. You can't change it. You must embrace it. I didn't do this with my kids. I didn't realize I had to do this. But I now think there's no more important word that you can speak over your children than God made you perfectly. If we all arm our children with truth and cover them in the blood of Jesus, if we step into our Esther and our Deborah and our Mordecai calling, I truly believe we will win this battle. Thank you.